The days in our suburban life felt like they were on repeat, predictable and long, much like the steady rhythm of a drum. Sue and I had been married for 7 years, and in that time, we'd faced numerous challenges together. Our family, consisting of our 2 beautiful children, Emily and Daniel, felt complete. But one chilly evening during late autumn, I began to sense a subtle shift. "Hey, Sue, how was your day at work?" I asked as we settled down for dinner at our familiar dining table. Sue looked up from her platte, her eyes bright with an unusual enthusiasm. "It was fantastic, John. You won't believe how amazing Frank is as a manager. He's just brilliant," she exclaimed. Her excitement about Frank struck me as more than just admiration for his professional abilities. There was something in her tone that made me feel uneasy. In the following weeks, Sue's admiration for Frank seemed to grow exponentially. She couldn't seem to stop talking about him, his intelligence, charisma, and leadership skills. It made me increasingly uneasy. One evening, I decided I couldn't ignore my suspicions any longer. "Sue, I've noticed you've been mentioning Frank a lot lately. Is there something more than just a good working relationship?" I asked cautiously. Sue's eyes widened briefly, and she let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, John, you're being silly. Frank is just a great manager, that's all," she reassured me. Despite her words, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. That night, I lay awake in bed, my mind consumed with doubts. The seed of suspicion had taken root, and I knew I had to do something. The next day, I made a decision, a drastic one. I installed remote monitoring software on Sue's phone and laptop. I knew it was a breach of privacy and ethically questionable, but I couldn't suppress my suspicions any longer. As the program began to gather data, I wondered if I was uncovering the truth or simply succumbing to paranoia. Over the weeks that followed, I watched, listened, and analyzed Sue's interactions with Frank. Each piece of evidence only served to deepen my suspicions. What had once been a loving and trusting marriage was now shrouded in uncertainty. If I didn't confront the truth soon, I feared it would consume us both. Weeks turned into months as I continued to monitor Sue's interactions with Frank. The evidence kept piling up, conversations evolving from strictly work-related to personal and increasingly flirtatious. My doubts grew, stronger with each passing day, and I found myself torn between wanting to believe in our love and facing the harsh reality of betrayal. I couldn't shake the sinking feeling that something was really wrong. One evening, while we sat in our living room, the tension between us felt unbearable. It hung in the air like a storm about to break. My voice shook as I finally spoke up. "Sue, we need to talk about Frank," I said, my heart pounding hard. Sue looked up from her book, her face pretending innocence. "What about Frank, John?" she replied. Summoning all my courage, I took a deep breath. "I've seen the messages, Sue, the ones you've been sending to him. They're not just work-related anymore, are they?" Sue's eyes darted away, and she shifted uncomfortably. "John, it's not what you think. Frank and I are just friends. Yes, we talk about work, but we also talk about other things. It's harmless." But my stomach twisted tighter. "Harmless, Sue? The messages I've seen, they're more than friendly. They're intimate, flirtatious. You can't deny that." For a brief moment, guilt flickered in Sue's eyes as she met my gaze. "John, please don't make this into something it's not. Frank is just a friend, and I'd never do anything to harm our marriage." But her words lacked conviction, and I knew we were at a turning point. The trust that had held our love together was breaking apart. In the following weeks, the monitoring software revealed more about Sue's emotional connection with Frank. They shared inside jokes, exchanged compliments, and talked about their deepest desires. It hurt to see Sue slipping away into this other world. Despite the mounting evidence, Sue clung to her denial, insisting their relationship was innocent. But I couldn't ignore the growing gap between us. The woman I'd shared my life with for years was slipping away, and it tore me apart inside. Tangled in a mess of lies and betrayal, the days melted into weeks, and I couldn't shake the evidence of Sue's emotional affair with Frank. The weight of it all became too much to bear. I knew I couldn't go on living in this uncertainty. It was time to face the truth, even if it meant the end of our marriage. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I sat down with Sue at our kitchen table. The room was dim and silence hung thick between us. Summoning all my courage, I brought up the topic that had haunted me for too long. "Sue, we need to talk about our future," I said, meeting her eyes.
Filled with a mix of worry and sadness. "John, I know you're upset about Frank, but I've told you before. There's nothing going on between us," she replied, her voice strained. But I couldn't hold back my frustration any longer. "Sue, I've seen the messages, the late-night calls. You can't keep denying it. What's happening between you and Frank is more than just a friendship." Tears welled up in her eyes, and she finally broke down. "John, I didn't want it to come to this. I didn't want to hurt you. But yes, I've developed feelings for him. I don't know how it happened, but it did." Her admission pierced me like a dagger. My worst fears had been confirmed, and the pain was unbearable. "Sue, I can't continue like this. I can't watch our marriage fall apart." Determined to protect our children and secure my own future, I knew I had to take action. The next day, I consulted a divorce lawyer, explaining the situation and the evidence I had gathered. The attorney's office felt cold and sterile compared to the warmth of our home. Sue and I sat across from each other, tension thick in the air, as the lawyer addressed us. "Divorce is a difficult process, especially when children are involved. Mr. and Mrs. Anderson, are you sure this is the path you want to take?" the lawyer asked, her words heavy with reality. I glanced at Sue, seeing regret in her eyes. "I never wanted it to come to this," she whispered, her voice trembling. The lawyer nodded solemnly. "I understand it's painful, but we need to prepare for the worst-case scenario. I'll draft the necessary documents, and we'll proceed with filing for divorce." As the lawyer explained the process, it became painfully clear that our once happy life was unraveling before our eyes. Sue and I left the attorney's office with heavy hearts, knowing our future was uncertain, and the pain of divorce loomed over us like a dark cloud. I parked my car in the dimly lit hotel parking lot, my mind racing with a mix of apprehension and determination. Climbing the stairs, each step felt heavy as my heart pounded louder with every footfall. As I stood outside their door, I could hear hushed voices from within. My hand trembled as I raised it to knock, and the voices abruptly fell silent. The door swung open, revealing Sue and Frank, both frozen in shock. Sue's face went pale as she stammered, "John, what are you doing here?" Taking a deep breath, I mustered the courage to speak, my voice trembling with a mixture of
Anger and sadness. "I think you know why I'm here, Sue. I couldn't let this go on any longer." Frank, clearly caught off guard, tried to speak, but I silenced him with a wave of my hand. "Save it, Frank. I know everything. It's over." With those words, I handed Sue the divorce papers I had brought. The weight of the moment hung heavily in the air, feeling like the final nail in the coffin of our marriage. Tears welled up in Sue's eyes as she took the papers, her voice choked with regret. "I never wanted it to come to this, John. I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice trembling. Unable to bear the sight of her pain, I turned away, the confrontation laying bare the painful truth. As I left the hotel room, the weight of my decision settled upon me, knowing our lives would never be the same. The confrontation at the hotel had been harrowing, but it was only the beginning of a tumultuous period in our lives. The aftermath brought about a cascade of consequences that none of us were prepared for. Sue's face bore the marks of pain etched deeply into her features, and the road ahead seemed daunting for all of us. Sue collapsed to the floor, tears streaming down her face after I handed her the divorce papers. Frank had already left the hotel room, leaving us to face the wreckage of our marriage. That night was long, filled with tears and difficult conversations. In the days that followed, the reality of our situation sank in. Sue's emotional affair with Frank had shattered the trust between us, and it became evident that our marriage couldn't be salvaged. Sue moved out of our family home, leaving it empty and cold without her warmth. Breaking the news to Emily and Daniel, our innocent children, was the hardest part. They sat in the living room, confused and worried. I struggled to find the right words as I explained that Mum and Dad needed to live in separate houses for a while. Tears welled up in Emily's eyes as she clung to Sue, trembling with fear. "Are you getting a divorce?" she asked. Sue nodded, her voice trembling, but assured them that we would always love them no matter what. Watching our children grapple with the heartbreaking reality of our split, I knew our decision had consequences. But it was necessary to protect them from the toxic environment our marriage had become. Amidst the chaos, Sue's despair took a dangerous turn, leading her to attempt self-harm, a desperate cry for help that shook me to my core. It reminded me of the pain that had brought us to this point. Sue was admitted to a mental health facility to get the help she needed. I took custody of Emily and Daniel, moving back into our family home. It felt different, haunted by memories of our broken marriage. Overnight, I became a single parent, juggling work, household responsibilities, and the emotional needs of our children. It was a heavy burden, and loneliness weighed me down, but I was determined to provide a stable and loving environment for Emily and Daniel. Our family may have been shattered, but I was committed to picking up the pieces and ensuring that their lives weren't irreversibly scarred by our divorce. As the days turned into weeks, the path ahead remained uncertain. But one thing was clear: the aftermath of that fateful night had forever changed the course of our lives. Left to navigate the aftermath of our once strong love, Sue's admission to a mental health facility changed our family forever. As a single parent, caring for Emily and Daniel became my sole responsibility amidst the complexities of our fractured marriage. Co-parenting became our new reality, filled with both heartache and determination. Despite the breakdown of our relationship, I couldn't abandon Sue completely. Our children needed both of us, so we agreed to co-parent. This decision brought its own challenges and emotional turmoil. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, I had a virtual meeting with Sue. Her weary face and haunted eyes spoke volumes of the demons she battled. "John, I'm so sorry for everything," she began, her voice fragile with regret. I sighed, feeling the weight of our situation. "Sue, I believe you're sorry, but we can't change the past. Now we need to focus on what's best for Emily and Daniel." She nodded, lips trembling. "You're right. They're our priority, and I want to be there for them." We established a co-parenting schedule that allowed Sue regular visits with our children. It was painful to watch her interact with them, knowing the hurt she had caused, but I could see the love in her eyes as she tried to rebuild their trust. Our daily communication sessions were tense, filled with unspoken resentment and lingering pain. But we soldiered on, discussing the logistics of our children's lives and their emotional needs. During one of our virtual meetings, Sue couldn't hold back her tears any longer. "John, I miss them so much. I miss our family." Despite my anger and hurt, I felt a pang of sympathy. "Sue, we're all hurting right now, but we have to find a way to move forward for the sake of the kids." She wiped away her tears, her voice softening. "You're right, John. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right, to be a better mother and co-parent." It was a small ray of hope amidst our shattered lives, a tentative step toward healing the wounds that tore us apart. Co-parenting was a delicate balance between our past and our future, filled with challenges, but we were committed to it for the sake of our children. As weeks turned into months, we navigated the ups and downs of co-parenting, each day bringing us closer to a new sense of normalcy. The scars of our broken marriage were still fresh, but we were determined to provide a stable and loving environment for Emily and Daniel, even as we struggled to find our own paths forward. With time came a fragile acceptance and a tentative understanding between Sue and me. Our co-parenting arrangement became a daily routine, with its own challenges and moments of unexpected connection. Chapter 7 marked the beginning of a future that felt uncertain, yet not entirely without hope. One evening, as I sat in my dimly lit study, Sue's name illuminated my phone screen. Her voice trembled on the other end of the line. "John, I've been thinking a lot about everything that's happened." I could sense the sincerity in her tone, a stark contrast to our earlier strained conversations. "What are you trying to say, Sue?" I asked. She took a deep breath, her words slow and deliberate. "I know I messed up, John. I hurt you and the kids, and I'm so sorry for that. But I want to change. I want to be a better person and earn back your trust." Taken aback by her admission, I leaned back in my chair. "Sue, rebuilding trust takes time and consistent effort." Her voice wavered with determination. "I know, John. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. I want to show you that I can change, that I can be the person you once loved." As we talked, a glimmer of hope stirred within me. Though the future was uncertain and our past wounds far from healed, perhaps there was a chance for redemption, a possibility of rebuilding what we had lost. In the following weeks, Sue began attending therapy sessions to address the underlying issues that led to her emotional affair. It was a painful and introspective journey, requiring her to confront her vulnerabilities and insecurities. During one of our virtual co-parenting meetings, Sue shared her progress with me. "John, therapy has been difficult, but it's helping me understand." I nodded, cautiously hopeful. "Sue, I hope you're sincere about changing, not just for your sake, but for the kids as well." She met my gaze with determination. "I am, John. I want to be a better mother and a better person." As the weeks turned into months, we continued to co-parent, but something shifted in our dynamic. The anger and resentment began to fade, replaced by a fragile sense of understanding and empathy. It was a delicate bridge between our past and a potential future, one that still felt uncertain but no longer impossible. Our story reached a conclusion with the acknowledgement that our marriage was still broken, but not beyond repair. Though wounds remained, the possibility of healing and rebuilding trust had emerged as a distant yet hopeful prospect. Our journey was far from over, but the path ahead wasn't as dark anymore. The chance to reassess our relationship lingered on the horizon.